From the ages.
In the country of Elam, the highland near Persia, historians noted the first appearance of the potter's wheel and the cartwheel. Since the Elamites were nomads and lived in rough country, the wheel may have evolved from putting logs under primitive sleds so they would roll easier than they could be dragged.
This statement came from the notes of a French archaeologist who found evidence of human remains not far from the Persian Gulf, dating 20,000 years before Christ.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. The famous sportscaster of yesteryear, Ted Husing, was one of the handiest men of all time with the spoken word. In machine gun style, exactly appropriate words poured from him in tense broadcasting situations of all kinds. He got this fluency by reading the dictionary, picking words, writing them down 3 times, and repeating their meaning. Once he had done this, he became remarkable among men because of his ability to store these words and meanings, then bring them up at just the right moment when they were needed. For this, he became an unparalleled phenomena in the first half of this century. The phenomena of the second half of that same century will probably be the computer, machines that can store, memorize, and recall so completely and quickly that human beings are only able to guide and program them, not perform competitively with them. Maybe you remember Art Linkletter's program some time ago.
Hello?
Hello, Shirley.
Yes.
This is Bob Cardell. I'm not quite sure what this is all about, but I was told to call you tonight at 8 o'clock.
Were you ever infatuated with the voice of a stranger on the telephone? That's what happened on that telephone call that we've recorded and played for you. And if you watched our last program, you saw a girl named Shirley Saunders who had written in to find a mate through our UNIVAC selection system and who had...
Yes, you're right. That was the first step after the punch cards carrying the personality traits and interests of one Bob Cardell and Shirley Saunders, total strangers, were processed through a UNIVAC machine. The answer came up that they were compatible for marriage. They didn't even have to meet in a cafeteria, at a bus stop, or bump into each other in a swinging door. They had never seen each other, so Art Linkletter was ready to arrange a surprise meeting to test the infallibility of a machine in matrimonial matters.
Well, now let's go on down the audience and see if we can find your fella. Now, Shirley, here in the audience, looking out over this array of faces, we will show you several people, one of whom is your UNIVAC mate, and I want to see if you can recognize him. Now, take a look at this first man right there in the first row. Handsome young fella, isn't he?
Yes.
Uh-huh. You recognize him at all? You don't have any feeling one way or the other?
No.
Uh-huh. Now, take a look at the second young man right there. Uh-huh. Blonde, good-looking. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. He might very well be. Now, we'll look at the third man up the row as a brunette. He's a big, tall, good-looking fella. Do you feel anything special toward any one of these fellas?
I feel like kissing you.
How did it turn out? Well, they are Mr. and Mrs. Bob Cardell today, happily married and have been for many, many months. What happened here dated from 22,000 years ago when man first found the principle of the wheel, and a highly sophisticated machine had successfully invaded the most basic of human relationships. To prove it, I went on a hunt for my next guest. Would you identify yourself, please?
Well, I'm Bob Cardell of the System Development Corporation in Santa Monica.
Being with System Development Corporation, which specializes in computer operations, The UNIVAC experience must have left its mark on you.
The engineers and scientists, which there are approximately 3,500 at system development, are engaged in the development of large-scale man-machine control systems. Possibly the largest of these is the SAGE system in the aerospace defense area. I'm sure that the current SAGE system, which is a factor against the manned bomber threat today, will be improved and sophisticated so all offensive and defensive military forces can be managed from a single console or switchboard, or teams of them. This will be more true of space then than it is today.
While we're used to seeing such computer operations as data processing and bookkeeping, what are some of the advanced areas you're getting into?
There are also experimental systems in use at the present time on automated teaching systems and medical diagnoses.
People are prone to talk about these things as mechanical brains or mental machines. Is this actually true?
Well, I'm afraid not. The machine in itself does nothing. It's activated by people. The information is put into the machine by people. The only function that the machine actually serves is in the systematizing, the speeding up of man's operations. It doesn't do anything but what a man could do for himself in a much longer period of time.
Is this really an extension, then, of the slide rule, which helped the mathematicians so much and still does?
Yes, in essence it is. The earliest form of this type of operation was the abacus.
It may take men and women to build them, men and women to run them, but the age of the machine is still in its infancy. It will change the face of the world, watch the face of the world, and provide greater leisure for all the people. Since that youngster of yours who will enter kindergarten this fall will be 45 in the year 2000, he will benefit from and use machines in ways not generally known today. Bob, what will machines or computers be doing in the year 2000?
At that time, we'd keep records on everyone, from the cradle to the grave. These would include their medical records, all of the pertinent birth information, their employment records, educational background, whether they had run afoul of the law at any time. These would all be centrally stored in computers. At birth, each person would be assigned a code and card number. And at any subsequent time, by simply feeding this code or card number into the centralized computer, it would print out every last thing that was involved in his background. Then we go into other larger areas. Our entire defense project, what we might call an aerospace program, would be entirely automated. The stop and go button on every machine would have to be activated by a human finger.
Then are machines apt to go in governing the conduct of man, ruling his world, making his life better or worse? Will things go so far that a little dust in his punch card for medical diagnosis will change what ails him from measles to mumps? Or if he inserts the card a little cockeyed, which will take him to Aunt Minnie's house on that future computerized transportation, is he apt to wind up at the downtown drugstore instead? Apparently not, because the human factor, the ability to break a programmed move when error is detected, will always have to be there. The old historians and biologists tell us that the greatest evolutionary breakthrough of all was man's brain. It has been man's brain which has given us a degree of machine-produced mentality, with which, even though the brain moves more slowly, it is still required as a shepherd.
has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
This is Alex Dreier. When I tell you every day of Man on the Go, I can't resist thinking now and again where he's going to be in the years ahead. And so, for this reason, I wanted to call your attention to a new transcribed radio series on this station called Face to the Future. It was produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and presents the 13 indivisible factors which will influence man as he approaches the year 2000. Remember, it's Face to the Future, and on this station.
This is Alan Jackson. Nearly everyone has been admonished by someone to plan ahead. Maybe it's his banker, his lawyer, his insurance man, or even his spouse. It is usually based on the prospects of his children and the world he hopes they will live in. For this reason, I want to tell you about a new radio series on this station called Face to the Future, which has been produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. In it, you'll hear about the 13 most important things which will influence the shape and nature of the world in the year 2000. Remember, it's Face to the Future on this station.
This is Chet Huntley. In the news business, one is lucky to meet all the succession of deadlines in a given day and to stay abreast of that day's developments. To be able to anticipate or be ahead of the news is a luxury few of us get to enjoy. For this reason, I thought you'd be interested in the new radio series on this station called Face to the Future, which was produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. The 13 most important factors in our progress toward the year 2000. How they'll influence what the world looks like then will be treated in Face to the Future. Remember, it's Face to the Future on this station.
This is Dallas Townsend. In the news business, you're lucky to be able to look forward to the next deadline in the next hour. Anything beyond that is a luxury. That's why I thought you'd like to know about a new radio series on this station called Face to the Future, which has been produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Face to the Future considers the 13 most important factors in our progress toward the year 2000, the kinds of things any parent with school-age youngsters would find interesting. Remember, it's Face to the Future, and on this station.
This is Larry LuSuer. If someone came to you in the next 5 minutes and offered to tell you what the world would be like 40 years from now, would you listen? I'm sure you would. That's why I thought you'd be interested in the new radio series on this station called Face to the Future, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. There are 13 all-important considerations, things having to do with progress, as we work our way toward the year 2000. Remember, you'll find out about them all in Face to the Future on this station.
An echo from the ages.
And Adam knew Eve, and she bare Cain.
That was the first human birth recorded in history, in the first verse, 4th chapter of Genesis.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome to Face to the Future. First off, let's talk about the figure 13. It's bad luck to the superstitious. But do you know why? More people are asking why about everything these days, so why should we be different? 13 became the symbol of bad luck in antiquity because primitive men with minimum mathematics counted by using their fingers and 2 feet. The resultant figure of 12 was handy in trade because it could be divided by 4 smaller figures, 2, 3, 4, and 6. 13 couldn't be divided by any whole number, so it became the mathematical great beyond, troublesome, difficult, and therefore bad luck. Face to the Future will be a series of 13 individual programs, each of the subjects treated, unable to be separated or divided from the other. Unless we are able to handle them better than primitive men could deal with the figure 13, then bad luck, the number, will remain for all of us. Not since the era of discovery and exploration initiated by Columbus has the future looked more exciting. The race into that future has begun to alter politics and the pulpit. It has created hard searches for power and propulsion. In this future we face, nothing is surer than that it will be a rich future if we go after it, or that there will be problems wherein lie opportunities for our children and theirs. First is birth rate. Everything will stem from it, both problems and solutions. It has entrapped some parts of the world already. Nehru wishes India had just half its population. Birth control in England has the blessing of the Church of England. Italy still has laws against it, dating from Mussolini, who was trying for a high birth rate to man his armies. France has a law against contraceptives, about as well enforced as our prohibition was. Khrushchev has made statements wanting Soviet families to have at least 3 or 4 children each, reflecting his concern that he may have to fight China's encroachments on Siberia in the future. Japan had 1 million abortions last year. Such things as birth rate were the substance of jokes 30 years ago.
I must tell you, gentlemen, at the outset of this speech that I am an Irishman. You know about Irishmen, of course. Once there were 2. Now there are millions.
From the 30s, when that joke was popular, to our time, the birth rate, which will change mankind's history, has gone from an after-dinner joke to a potential jeopardy for humanity. At the birth of Christ, there were 350 million people on Earth, and few lived past 30. There are nearly 9 times that many today, prospects of 18 times that many by the year 2000. Our Congress has interested itself in birth rate, and it has become a political issue. At the University of California, Professor William Peterson has written a new book called Population. I asked him how many people there were on Earth today and how many would be here in 40 years.
The usual estimate for the world population today is about 2.7 or 2.8 billion. This is increasing at the rate of about 100,000 persons per day. If this rate of increase continues to the end of this century, to the year 2000, the population of the world will be of the order of 6 billion.
How much of this problem is centered on North America?
In the North American continent, we have a rapidly increasing population. This is much more, I think, than is healthy, and we are already running into fundamental problems like shortage of water in the whole Southwest. And in Canada, every indication is that their population increase is under what it might be.
If we wait to face this future problem in North America, what will have to be done?
The difficulties of reversing it at that time will be considerably greater than at the present time, because now we still have a certain amount of room in every sense of this word to work with, and this room is disappearing.
We hear all manner of presentations to the effect that nature wouldn't have created a situation in which population could outrun food supply and place of residence. Is this realistic?
I think that this argument that a certain course is, quote, natural, is not ever a very convincing argument. We don't live naturally, and nobody really proposes that we do. If these people who speak about nature suggested that we stop cooking our food, and that we stop cultivating plants and animals, and that we stop wearing clothing, and that we go out and live in nature, then I might take their other arguments seriously, but I wouldn't take them seriously, because this is not a proposal that a sane man would want to follow.
It seems to me we have a lot of unnatural controls already.
We have a wholly unnatural control of mortality. All of the conditions that lead to early death in a primitive society, almost all of them have come under control to a marked degree. We've controlled almost everything except old age as a cause of death. This means that we take nature as a base, but we manipulate nature enormously.
Today, Nehru says India would be better off with half its population. At what time in American life, for instance, might there be a president confronted with an equal population tragedy?
I hope and trust that the present increase in the population of the United States will never be permitted to reach the dimensions that exist in India and similar countries today before Americans will exercise their intelligence and do something about it.
Does such a population spread tend to have war-making implications? Could it generate the makings of war?
I do think that if you have a regime which is interested in spreading itself, say for example the communist regime of China, which wants to move over Southeast Asia as far apparently as it can get, they can justify their attempts to conquer other peoples in terms of a demand for Lebensraum, just as Hitler did, so that given a certain political framework, which unfortunately is still rather common in the world today, I think that population pressure can be a strong aggravating factor.
To you as a sociologist, where does this lead? What conclusion?
So long as we have an, quote, unnatural death control, we have to balance this by an equally, quote, unnatural birth control.
Many wise men and women have said that there are lessons in history, and that the historian is one worth listening to. He knows man for what he has been, and what he has been, he's likely to be because he changes slowly. Here is one of the world's great historians, England's Arnold Toynbee.
We are all concerned for the salvation of our fellow human beings. We are all concerned to move them to make individual choices that will bring a better life within the reach of them and their children. We too must have faith in the human nature that is common to all men. If we have this faith, we can be equal to the task of helping these millions of human beings to save themselves. We can help them to choose right in making man's perennial choice between life and good and death and evil. But the decisions have to be taken by each one of us for himself. No one can take them for his neighbor.
The mother of today's youngster, who will enter kindergarten next fall, may wonder what this world and its environment will be at the year 2000. He will be about 45 years old, with a better than average chance of living to be 90. Whatever career he elects, he will have to make decisions in a world twice as heavily populated as now. I asked Professor Peterson to describe his world.
By the year 2000, there will no longer be arable land as there is now, for example, in Africa. The overpopulation now characteristic of India will be characteristic of the entire Earth's livable surface. There will be one Chinese to each other person on Earth. There may well be schools for sea farming, as today there are schools for land agriculture in order to provide the additional food we will need. Atomic energy may be available to melt the polar ice, to provide water to irrigate the Sahara. The 6 billion people living on Earth therefore may not be short of food, but they will certainly be less comfortable, more crowded. The population will bring about a sharper competition among nations for goods and for living space, and there will therefore be greater likelihood of major wars.
So many things started with Cain, the biblical first baby. He was a problem child, and as he acted, nations of people like him have acted. He taught us by killing his own brother that nations of men must be alert and ready to defend themselves. If we are twice as many people in the year 2000, whether we are twice as rich or twice as poor, we will be twice as concerned for our security from surface or space attack. Your sons and daughters will be making decisions, and how right those decisions will be guided by how intensively they have been prepared, how well they understand the consequences of action and inaction.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
Echo from the ages.
Man is not willingly a political animal. He does not love society as much as he fears solitude. He combines with other men because isolation endangers him, and because there are many things which can be done better together than alone.
That was a statement from the book called The History of Civilization by Will Durant.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. To those of you who take a daily newspaper, read a magazine, tune in your radio or TV set, or attend public meetings, it's hard to escape the fact that everything you do is affected by political actions. It's the practice of a strange but ancient art we call political science. Like everything else in life, it has its traditional face, its good face, and its evil distortions. An American once described it as the art of the possible. But Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong said, "Political power comes from a gun barrel. In fact, anything can come from a gun barrel." Time after time in history, the best work of political leaders, when they led from military weakness, found their situations impossible, and the outcome was the worst of all disillusionments, the worst of all developments, war.
Tomorrow, Parliament is going to meet, and I shall be making a full statement of the events which have led up to the present anxious and critical situation. After my visits to Germany, I realized vividly how Herr Hitler feels that he must champion other Germans. He told me privately, and last night he repeated publicly, that after this Sudeten German question is settled, that is the end of Germany's territorial claims in Europe.
That was Britain's Prime Minister Chamberlain, as he expressed a vain hope for peace. It was 1938. Czechoslovakia was no more, but a war was in the making. The man with the gun barrel was in the ascendancy against those who would only rely on words and weakness. And not too long after that, the day of reckoning came to America. The world heard President Roosevelt.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
When that war had come and gone, America had bounced into world leadership. A war which had cost her 1 million in dead and wounded had given her that leadership, and it had also pointed out the fallacy of unilateral military weakness. Statesmen of other years might fight for post-war rights and spheres of influence on the basis of highest casualty lists, but the world now leaned to the leadership of those who would negotiate for military power and use it to keep the peace until genuine agreements could be reached. President Truman was first to say why.
The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war.
Not long afterward, in this new era of changing atomic political advantage, Red China made its claim for a seat in the United Nations. It had won precedence and power by machine gun, the chopping block, and more than 800,000 of its people would die in executions for being in real or fancied dissent. Red China would enter volunteers in Korea, would back communist elements in Vietnam, would fight in the Formosa Straits, take Tibet, and menace India. Even the Soviet Union, motherland of communism, now has to face the prospect that the offspring might eat the parent, and then some. Great political realignments are taking place. Great political actions and greater ones are forecast.
Mr. Chairman, I welcome you, your family, and party to the United States. I am especially happy that Mrs. Cruikshank and other members of your family are accompanying you. On behalf of the government and of the people of America, I express the hope that you and they will find your stay among us interesting and useful. I am looking forward to the talks we will have together.
Господин председатель Совета Министров, я приветствую вас, вашу семью и сопровождаю...
The lines are drawn. Will it be political power from the gun barrel, or the art of the possible, or both? The difference between Chamberlain's visit to Munich and the present era exchange of visits between the leaders of the Soviet and the U.S. is that Khrushchev saw the faces of a determined people, armed against attack. Were leaders of the Western world required to react quickly to aggression today, they would have a weapon system to react with, not just words alone. My next guest is from California. Would you identify yourself, please?
I'm Dr. Hilton P. Goss, manager of the social science operation of the General Electric Company's technical military planning operation in Santa Barbara.
We're so accustomed to political science in government, but isn't this political projection for cooperation planning new?
It's really a very recent development on any corporate level, whether large or small, and dates back no more than 4 or 5 years in the main.
From your perspective, American business, are the current Russian moves political probes or military threats, in your opinion?
The primary motive is political, and that for 2 reasons. The first reason that Russia is in no position to provoke and indulge in a war which could easily become total. The second reason is that Russia needs very strenuously to consolidate her political advancements of the past 20 or 30 years.
Well, we normally think of 2 great powers in the world today, the United States and the Soviet Union. How far into the future do you think this will extend?
This relationship is already in a state of change. The period has passed when the United States and the Soviet Union were the 2 sole occupants of the top level. Evidence already exists that Western Europe, India, Red China, and several other power centers are emerging and are challenging the United States and the Soviet Union for the occupancy of this top position. It would be our estimate that the year 2000 would be a point where you might see the emergence of Africa as a power center.
Some believe the political challenges of the future will be so great that we will arbitrarily have to limit ourselves in the use of resources. Do you see a political problem here?
Well, politically, it'll be a very hot potato, as you can imagine. I would say that we would see more and more an agreement that the citizens of a democracy must recognize responsibilities as well as privileges.
So today it's Russia, Red China. Tomorrow, new power centers. While political science is being used to develop the world economically, scientifically, intellectually, and in other profound and far-reaching ways, it will not be safe in the foreseeable future for its stability to be unprotected by military force. When Hitler took Czechoslovakia in 1938, America had less than 200,000 in her armed forces. When he launched World War II, we were still in the same slow motion. Listen now to the warning historian, Britain's Arnold Toynbee, at the United Nations.
The Second World War has, I suppose, been one of the greatest tragedies in human history so far. It was particularly tragic because, as Sir Winston Churchill has argued, it was avoidable.
With this reminder of the feelings of one of the world's great political scientists and statesmen, to whom the world and his country paid little attention to be strong militarily in time to be effective, I now ask Dr. Goss to forecast the implications of the year 2000 in the political field.
Probably 3 or 4 most important challenges could be enumerated. One, how the individual in the world of 2000 can keep his identity. Secondly, how will groups of individuals, and by this we mean nations, be able to avoid mutual destruction? Thirdly, how will the potential of the human race be drawn into action for the good of all mankind? And fourthly, and most importantly for our purposes, how will the people of a democracy keep their freedom without surrendering unity in the force of a common peril?
The influence of and demands upon the political scientist and the practical politician are growing increasingly greater. Where he could once protect constituents in a county or province, he has recently had to watch out for continents and is expanding into the configuration of the universe itself. The youngster who enters kindergarten this fall will be 45 at the year 2000. His challenge is to achieve for the living by vision and vitality. Momentary comforts of today should never be allowed by him to obscure discomforts and destruction which can wait in an insecure future.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
Echo from the ages.
If a man has accused another of laying a death spell upon him, but has not proved it, he shall be put to death.
That was the first law inscribed by Hammurabi, empire builder and first lawgiver in history, 1700 years before Christ.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. In the relatively simple life of most of us, law is something which protects property and property rights, and catches up with us when we're doing 50 in a 35-mile speed zone. If the law has trouble catching the speeder every time, and we get away with it once in a while, consider the plight of law and its practitioners who must try to catch up with a world whose jurisdictions are spreading far off the Earth's surface. Some of it was recently indicated in an article on international law in Time magazine.
If a Swiss citizen were to get tired of his wife and throw some arsenic in her martini as they were flying on a British airliner from the airport in Frankfurt, Germany to Paris, France, the question might be, which country should prosecute? Would it be Great Britain because the plane is a British airliner and chartered by the British Empire? Or would it be France because the plane would land at the Paris, Orly, or Le Bourget airports after the crime had been committed, where the body would be removed by the gendarmes, who would also arrest the husband? Or would the case have to be pulled all the way back to Switzerland, because the crime had been committed against a Swiss citizen by another Swiss citizen? Or would it have to come to German courts, because each nation has jurisdiction over the airspace above it, and the arsenic was dumped in the martini while the couple was still over Germany? Or could it conceivably be turned over to some international court of justice in The Hague, in the Netherlands? Confusing, isn't it? Let's think about this for a moment.
While this problem is currently being tackled under auspices of the United Nations, and some 27 countries have had their representatives at work on it, there are other developments much farther out than this with which we must contend. Just before Russia's Khrushchev came to America for his visit, his country's scientists had landed a rocket payload on the moon, and part of that payload was the flag of the Soviet Union. In other times of exploration, the planting of the flag amounted to staking a national claim. Since then, Russia has photographically mapped the backside of the moon. To get at some of the implications of this, I turned to political expert Dr. Hilton Goss, once a member of the faculty of the Air University.
It certainly indicates the problem of what international law will do to extend itself into the space realm. International law, as you probably know, is still operating on the basis of the old maritime conditions of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, where the distance of jurisdiction related to the distance a cannon aboard a ship could fire. When you project that into the age of the airplane, international law has not caught up in the least with happenings since 1903. And now you take that further out into space, international law, of course, is in a very serious condition to cope with the problems of possible exploration and utilization and manipulation of territory on the other planets.
So here we are, a nation which only recently had range wars about barbed wire fences on the open grazing lands of the West, something still in the living memory of many people. And we are beginning to deal in the fenceless realms of space, where laws and their enforcement are far tougher to handle than any barbed wire ever was. Here is New Zealander Sir Leslie Munro of the United Nations.
I think the impetus came, so far as we were concerned, from Sputnik. That certainly started us thinking and talking about this matter in the United Nations, where in any case there are a great many lawyers. I suggested that the United Nations was the proper forum because the small powers could be heard. And as the representative of a small power, and one who believes that the great powers have not necessarily a monopoly of wisdom, I think that we are entitled to speak, and it is only really in the United Nations that we can make ourselves be heard. And in any case, as this is an international matter, and does not, I think, really allow for claims of sovereignty, and as we are concerned about control, then obviously the proper forum is the United Nations.
Our approach to the legal aspects of space is a somewhat gingerly one, but the Russians, with their achievements beyond the atmosphere, are not above using space as a legal weapon to achieve political and military advantage. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Here's Sir Leslie again.
The Soviet Union asked that the banning of the use of cosmic space for military purposes, the elimination of foreign bases on the territories of other countries, and international cooperation in the study of cosmic power be included in the provisional agenda of the United Nations. You will observe, by the way, that the Russians linked this matter up with the elimination of foreign bases on the territories of other countries. I completely disagree, by the way, with that connection.
Many a gimlet legal eye is being put to the space area. Each statement of a world leader, and whether or not he's disputed, is being filed and gone over for foundation stones or possible legal precedent. Here is Dr. Oscar Schachter, General Counsel of the United Nations, on some of the legal lighting of the way already.
We've had satellites up in the outer space. We've had statements by the President of the United States. We've had ample opportunity for other states to object to the assumption of the United States and the Soviet Union that they had the right to send the satellite. It seems to me, therefore, that we can even conservatively accept at least the inception of a legal rule that outer space, wherever it begins, is not subject to sovereignty. In the classic international law phrase, common property belonging to everybody and incapable of being appropriated by a single state.
While the short-range cannon could once decide, the far-ranging space vehicle so far denies anything in the way of enforcing, policing, or military destructive action. The urge to get on with workable international law and to use law as an instrument and justice as an instrument in settling international disputes has intrigued thoughtful men the world over. It was a main point with the American Bar Association conventions, and President Eisenhower, on his recent trip to India, addressed himself to the increasing importance of law and the rule of law.
A world of swift economic transformation and growth must also be a world of law. The time has come for mankind to make the rule of law in international affairs as normal as it is now in domestic affairs. This is so, I believe, for one good reason. If an international controversy leads to armed conflict, everybody loses. If armed conflict is avoided, therefore everybody wins. It is better to lose a point now and then in an international tribunal and gain a world in which everyone lives at peace under a rule of law.
All this may seem strange to think about. World law or international law, space law. They seem to be odd to engage us when the dockets of most courts are loaded with so many simple infractions of the law and highly complex by today's standards, appeals for position and adjudication. This kind of law dealing with intimate human relations will go on and be needed. When Hammurabi wrote his laws 1700 years before Christ, they covered trial, fines and punishments, slavery and property ownership, marriage, divorce, alimony and protection of children. Law will never depart from these concerns. But listen to Andrew Haley, General Counsel of the American Rocket Society, as he projects law and some of its concerns in the year 2000.
A large number of problems will have then crossed the path of humanity. We will have colonies on the moon. The moon may be independent, should by that time be an independent entity of its own and not subject to jurisdiction on Earth. We'll have problems of relationship with the moon, undoubtedly with Mars and maybe Venus. We'll have meteoritic mining. We undoubtedly will have colonies of people living on the minor planets, what they call the asteroids. There will then be a body of law involving immigration and emigration. There will be a whole new civilization, and with all the legal problems that go with such changes, there will undoubtedly be many more when the year 2000 comes along.
When Hammurabi put down his first law, he said in effect that unless a man had his facts straight and was honest in their presentations, he would come to no good end, and the law would see to it. When man submitted to the rule of law, he took his longest step from the lesser members of the animal kingdom. He has, however, some reservations about law standing alone, locally, internationally, or spatially without some means of enforcement. In any local community, it's the policeman who watches out against the intruder. In the national community, it's the military forces whose readiness and quality stands off the enemy. Weakness of either makes law a mockery and all mankind unsafe.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
from the ages.
The words God and sky were once interchangeable to many people. The sky was worshipped as the giver and withholder of rain. With the Mongols, the single word was Tengri. In China, Di. In India, the Father Sky. And among the Greeks, it was Zeus. They all meant sky.
That statement was taken from Will Durant's book, Our Oriental Heritage.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. If you're like me, never a day goes by in which your eyes do not look up beyond the buildings or the trees and at what we call the sky or the heavens. Throughout recorded history, and long before that, mankind looked skyward for many things. If it was clear and daylight, there was the sun. If clear and night, the moon. If it was cloudy, there might be rain, and with it lightning and thunder. It gave or did things to man, and man gave it back respect and fear. Now, after the limited experience of man in flight, he is about to put more and more things into the region of the sky, seeking by experimentation to put them there with varying degrees of permanence. One of these men is the flight test engineer and space pioneer, Scott Crossfield of North American Aviation in Los Angeles. His flights of the X-15 have caused God-fearing men to write him letters of concern that he's venturing beyond where man should go. I asked him how he felt about this.
Well, Delvina, for those who often ask me whether or not I'm getting into God's realm, I have only this to say. There's nothing in this work that I can find that violates the teachings of our forefathers for the last 2,000 years.
Tampering with the unknowns of space, the possibilities that it might not stay peaceful, but become a route for military invasion or missile tracks in the future, the thought that men might have to defend their people in the heavens, unsettles varying percentages of mankind all over the globe. This concern has primitive roots, deep roots. Today, if one were to ask in any part of the world where a deity is believed in, for an explanation of what that deity means, he will get as many different answers as there are people, but a somewhat basic agreement in his existence. Not all people believe so surely, however.
In Chicago today, Sir Julian Huxley, speaking on the 100th anniversary of Darwin, stirred some old controversial ashes of evolution. Speaking to a university audience, he said, quote, "Evolutionary man can no longer take refuge from his loneliness in the arms of a divinized father figure whom he has himself created, nor escape the responsibility of making decisions by sheltering under the umbrella of divine authority, nor absolve himself of the hard task of meeting his present problems and planning his future by relying on the will of an omniscient but inscrutable providence." Unquote.
Theology has had its attackers and critics throughout time. Lenin described religion as the opiate of the people, but many of his people chose this opiate, and some were obliterated for so failing to support his grand design. The atheist Robert Ingersoll pooh-poohed religion by saying an honest God is the noblest work of man, giving to man rather than God the role of creator. Certainly we can put no face to the future which is without theology, even a challenged theology. With this period in mind, and the future too, I have two guests, one representing Protestant Christianity, one Judaism. Would you identify yourselves, please?
Yes, I'm the Right Reverend James A. Pike, Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of California, which covers the San Francisco and Central Coastal area of the state.
I am Rabbi Max Nussbaum, minister of Temple Israel of Hollywood.
Since religious interest is on the rise in many parts of the world, particularly in America, would you account for this in the various insecurities with which we live?
There are, I believe, two reasons for it. One is the evolving American pattern by which racial units are gradually losing their identity, but the religious differentiation has become part and parcel of the American pattern, so that belonging to a church or a synagogue has become a part of social life. And secondly, and maybe even more important, is the fact that a generation which has just gone through a Second World War is now confronted with a threat of a new one from which there will be no survivors, if it ever happens, that such a generation begins to ask ultimate questions about the purpose of life, the reason for our being here, the value of life. And such questioning leads inevitably to the synagogue and the church.
We have a great many fellow travelers of Christianity now, using the communist analogy, people that aren't card-carrying members, but who are very much using these resources in their lives, and many more people of that type than existed a decade or 2 decades ago. Also, much of the religious interest does manifest itself in terms of kind of using God, like a sleeping pill or shot in the arm or tranquilizer, whatever's needed. And this isn't quite really religious.
People who are engaged in military and space activities often get mail from other people who are disturbed by them. Is there anything in religious teaching which puts a brake on the search for security and knowledge?
To Judaism, this is not a problem, just the opposite. The more one goes in to reveal the mysteries of the universe, in our estimation, the more one discovers the most wonderful ways of divinity. To us, each new discovery of the human brain, the human mind, is a new revelation of God, and we have always believed in a continuous revelation.
People who are, quote, religious, unquote, have for centuries, perhaps even thousands of years, wanted to put the brake. We go back to Galileo and his troubles and so forth. But I regard this as quite wrong and overlooking a basic biblical teaching that man is made in the image of God and therefore shares in God's creative activity.
We are about to give the greatest emphasis in history to mathematics, physics, science, and engineering, which require varying degrees of realistic thinking and skepticism, even proving things are not so to get basic truths. Do you see any challenges to religious dogma in this?
To us, we have never seen in Judaism any possibility of any conflict between scientific discoveries and the truth of religion. As long as people know that this universe, with all its great color, beauty, mystery, is a part of a divine intelligence plan and didn't just happen by chance.
I see a real conflict between an attitude of religious obscurantism, one might call it, which thinks that we have answers to details of history and science and so forth written down once and for all in a book. I also see a real conflict from a scientism, which is different than science, which assumes that all the answers can be found through test tubes, or if they can't be found that way, then there's no truth to be known. Actually, science tells us nothing about the purposes of life or how we ought to use the things we find out. Likewise, religion can tell us nothing dogmatically and permanently about the scientific process or about the data of life. The meaning of that which science finds in terms of purpose and direction and free choice is in the realm of religion and ethics. Some years ago, some of the atomic scientists who felt kind of personally disturbed after Hiroshima issued a statement to the nation that we should use the nuclear information for positive and constructive causes and not for destructive ones. The newspapers ran that as science says. Well, this wasn't science saying anything. This was a group of men who happened to be scientists, functioning as amateur ethicists and theologians.
So as we walk steadily into our futures as individuals, most of the people of the Western world take heart that our political and military power is based on preserving the old biblical and ethical cry of peace on earth. But if you have a youngster entering kindergarten and Sunday school classes this fall, what will be the challenges of the year 2000 at his or her age of 45? Hear it from Bishop Pike and Rabbi Nussbaum.
The possibilities of good and of evil will be much intensified. Now, there's the same old problem, but the stakes will be higher.
Military power as such is like our scientific discoveries. It can be used for something very good and it can be used for something very evil. Totalitarian states have used it for evil purposes. In our nation, if our military forces understand that in the years to come they will have to protect not only human lives, but spiritual and religious values which alone make life worthwhile. If this is the role our military forces will play in the future, then they will be a blessing not only to the survival of the nation, but to the survival of spiritual forces.
So the nations of the Western world would take their political and military morality from the influence of theology, where we assume the defensive and would never strike a first blow. The communist world possesses the initiative and uses the upside-down tactic of the end justifying the means, falsehoods, deceit, broken agreements. There's a difference between the statement of the cynic and the tyrant, that might makes right, and our belief that right backed by might unused but available as the best chance in the world, whether it be rights of nations or rights of man.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
echo from the ages.
In the country of Elam, the highland near Persia, historians noted the first appearance of the potter's wheel and the cartwheel. Since the Elamites were nomads and lived in rough country, the wheel may have evolved from putting logs under primitive sleds so they would roll easier than they could be dragged.
This statement came from the notes of a French archaeologist who found evidence of human remains not far from the Persian Gulf, dating 20,000 years before Christ.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. The famous sportscaster of yesteryear, Ted Husing, was one of the handiest men of all time with the spoken word. In machine gun style, exactly appropriate words poured from him in tense broadcasting situations of all kinds. He got this fluency by reading the dictionary, picking words, writing them down 3 times, and repeating their meaning. Once he had done this, he became remarkable among men because of his ability to store these words and meanings, then bring them up at just the right moment when they were needed. For this, he became an unparalleled phenomena in the first half of this century. The phenomena of the second half of that same century will probably be the computer, machines that can store, memorize, and recall so completely and quickly that human beings are only able to guide and program them, not perform competitively with them. Maybe you remember Art Linkletter's program some time ago.
Hello?
Hello, Shirley.
Yes.
This is Bob Cardell. I'm not quite sure what this is all about, but I was told to call you tonight at 8 o'clock.
Were you ever infatuated with the voice of a stranger on the telephone? That's what happened on that telephone call that we've recorded and played for you. And if you watched our last program, you saw a girl named Shirley Saunders who had written in to find a mate through our UNIVAC selection system, and who had...
Yes, you're right. That was the first step after the punch cards carrying the personality traits and interests of one Bob Cardell and Shirley Saunders, total strangers, were processed through a UNIVAC machine. The answer came up that they were compatible for marriage. They didn't even have to meet in a cafeteria, at a bus stop, or bump into each other in a swinging door. They had never seen each other, so Art Linkletter was ready to arrange a surprise meeting to test the infallibility of a machine in matrimonial matters.
Well, now let's go on down the audience and see if we can find your fella. Now, Shirley, here in the audience, looking out over this array of faces, we will show you several people, one of whom is your UNIVAC mate, and I want to see if you can recognize him. Now, take a look at this first man right there in the first row. Handsome young fella, isn't he?
Yeah.
You recognize him at all? You don't have any feeling one way or the other?
No.
Now take a look at the second young man right there. Blonde, good looking. He might very well be. Now we'll look at the third man up the row as a brunette. He's a big, tall, good looking fella. Do you feel anything special toward any one of these fellas?
I feel like kissing him.
How did it turn out? Well, they are Mr. and Mrs. Bob Cardell today, happily married and have been for many, many months. What happened here dated from 22,000 years ago when man first found the principle of the wheel, and a highly sophisticated machine had successfully invaded the most basic of human relationships. To prove it, I went on a hunt for my next guest. Would you identify yourself, please?
Well, I'm Bob Cardell of the System Development Corporation in Santa Monica.
It's always difficult to establish firsts, but to your knowledge, Were you and your wife the first two people picked for marriage by a machine?
Well, first off, we were found to be compatible and we were mated by a machine, but I'm not quite sure that we were the first. It's my understanding that there has been a matrimonial agency in the New York area that utilizes machine operations for the mating of people.
Being with System Development Corporation, which specializes in computer operations, the UNIVAC experience must have left its mark on you.
The engineers and scientists, which there are approximately 3,500 at System Development, are engaged in the development of large-scale man-machine control systems. Possibly the largest of these is the SAGE system in the aerospace defense area. I'm sure that the current SAGE system, which is a factor against the manned bomber threat today, will be improved and sophisticated so all offensive and defensive military forces can be managed from a single console or switchboard, or teams of them. This will be more true of space then than it is today.
While we're used to seeing such computer operations as data processing and bookkeeping, what are some of the advanced areas you're getting into?
There are also experimental systems in use at the present time on automated teaching systems and medical diagnoses.
People are prone to talk about these things as mechanical brains or mental machines. Is this actually true?
Well, I'm afraid not. The machine in itself does nothing. It's activated by people. The information is put into the machine by people. The only function that the machine actually serves is in the systematizing, the speeding up of man's operations. It doesn't do anything but what a man could do for himself in a much longer period of time.
Is this really an extension then of the slide rule which helped the mathematicians so much and still does?
Yes, in essence it is. The earliest form of this type of operation was the abacus.
One of the areas of doing things by machine is apt to be teaching. How will this be done?
The direction that we are going in at this time and the attitude we like to take is that actually the automated teaching systems will perform the function of making it possible for accelerated students to progress faster by offering them more advanced tutorage on a specific subject. There was a discussion not too long ago by some of our leading educators in regard to this specific subject. The outline procedure at that time was to maintain as much as possible, a normal classroom atmosphere for a specific length of time. At the end of this time, the students would go into soundproof booths in which these computerized tutoring systems would be activated in connection with their various learning attitudes and the rapidity with which they grasped the subject.
How about the possibilities of medical diagnosis with machines? How would it be done?
Well, this is quite an extensive program here at System Development Corporation. Possibly the easiest way to explain it is to give you a little word picture of a typical operation that might occur in a computerized medical diagnosis. If you had a particular ailment, you went to your doctor and would describe the symptoms that you had at that particular time. Prior to this, all of the various symptoms and syndromes and all the rest of it that goes into it would have been fed into a centralized computer. At the time that you described your particular symptoms, they would be made up on an electronic data coding machine and transmitted to this central computer, at which time it would pull out the pertinent information about a particular illness and actually provide you with the combined opinion of all the world's best medical knowledge and transmit it back to your doctor's office to aid him in restoring you to health.
It may take men and women to build them, men and women to run them, but the age of the machine is still in its infancy. It will change the face of the world, watch the face of the world, and provide greater leisure for all the people. Since that youngster of yours who will enter kindergarten this fall will be 45 in the year 2000, he will benefit from and use machines in ways not generally known today. Bob, what will machines or computers be doing in the year 2000?
At that time, we'd keep records on everyone, from the cradle to the grave. These would include their medical records, all of the pertinent birth information, their employment records, educational background, whether they had run afoul of the law at any time. These would all be centrally stored in computers. At birth, each person would be assigned a code and card number. And at any subsequent time, by simply feeding this code or card number into the centralized computer, it would print out every last thing that was involved in his background. Then we go into other larger areas. Our entire defense project, what we might call an aerospace program, would be entirely automated. The stop and go button on every machine would have to be activated by a human finger.
How far, then, are machines apt to go in governing the conduct of man, ruling his world, making his life better or worse? Will things go so far that a little dust in his punch card for medical diagnosis will change what ails him from measles to mumps? Or if he inserts a card a little cockeyed, which will take him to Aunt Minnie's house on that future computerized transportation, is he apt to wind up at the downtown drugstore instead? Apparently not, because the human factor, the ability to break a programmed move when error is detected, will always have to be there. The old historians and biologists tell us that the greatest evolutionary breakthrough of all was man's brain. It has been man's brain which has given us a degree of machine-produced mentality, with which, even though the brain moves more slowly, it is still required as a shepherd.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina, with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
from the ages.
The dog that buried the bone, the squirrel that gathered nuts for a later feast, the bees that filled a comb with honey, ants that laid up stores for a rainy day. It was they and other subtle creatures like them who taught our ancestors the art of providing for tomorrow out of the surpluses of today.
That is a statement contained in the book, The Story of Civilization by Will Durant.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. Throughout history, hunger has been one of the greatest driving forces of mankind. Beside it, sex, power, desire for success are all pale in comparison. Nations under the compulsions of hunger have become nomadic peoples. Even today, it's possible in a few short weeks to reduce civilized man to animal-like status, where he can think of nothing but linking sustenance with his survival. Reports of prisoners of war on low-calorie diets have confirmed this over and over, as recently as Korea's wartime action. Through the ages, says Britain's famous historian, Dr. Arnold Toynbee, this has been the case.
Man once felt impotent in face of the three classic scourges of human life, war, pestilence, and famine. An invasion by human aggressors was, for our forefathers, on a par with, let us say, an invasion by locusts. Their onset is inexorable, so there is nothing that you can do with them but to fight them. And if you fail to destroy them, they will devour your crops and thus destroy you.
Sustenance then has been closely tied to war and has been a cause of war. It conceivably could still be an incitement to war, particularly if a great population became so hungry it could be exploited and pointed in the direction of plenty and the people who possess this plenty. Much depends on rainfall and the water supply generally, the distribution of rainfall being very unequal over the arable face of the earth. I wonder if you've ever thought about the demands we make upon water. Here is George Halazon of Kansas State Agricultural College.
Of course, water is of primary interest to our nation. It's of interest to city people. It's of interest to industrialists. And of course, everybody knows it's of great interest to the farmer. For instance, right now, the United States daily supply of water is about 600 billion gallons of pure fresh water. During 1959, the U.S. daily need for water was 270 billion gallons of water. But the anticipated 1980 U.S. daily needs for water is 600 billion gallons, just exactly equal to our supply. For every pound of dry leaf or seed that's produced by any plant, it takes from 300 to 1,000 pounds of water. The animal bodies are between 70 and 90% water. It takes over 150 gallons of water to make a 5-pound newspaper. It takes 285 tons of water to convert iron ore to 1 ton of steel. That sutuware takes about 11,000 pounds of water to create. And what we do with our water supply is going to help us determine what our country is going to be like in the future.
Have you ever noticed how vulnerable you are to the need for water or liquids? Just to hear the mention is often enough, or to see someone heading for a drinking fountain provides some compulsion. And how many times has a radio commercial for some liquid concoction sent you in the direction of the refrigerator to see what's on tap. The want of water can cause a man to fancy he sees it so clearly in the dry desert, he may even put some sand in his mouth before he will give up the illusion for what it is, a mirage. Prophets of doom have said that should the two polar ice caps melt, the water level of the oceans would rise so high, all the coastal areas and their great cities would be inundated and destroyed. Prophets of the future see the increase in water which could result from such melting, if properly controlled, making what are presently parched deserts, produce food for our rising populations, produce the greater sustenance required to support mankind. Today's problem is that parts of the world produce in abundance and others not at all, and distribution becomes difficult to effect any kind of equality. If we could control the distribution of rainfall, the distribution of food would be automatic because marginal portions of the landmass would become productive. Water has all kinds of necessity and all kinds of fascination. My next guest is a man who's had the strangest romance I know, a lifetime love affair with the oceans. Would you identify yourself, please?
I'm Roger Revelle. I'm professor of oceanography in the University of California and director of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and of the La Jolla campus of the University of California.
As an oceanographer, the sea can be seen at least two ways by you, sustenance and security. Could you enlarge on this?
The sea is just like the land in one respect, and that is that there are some areas which are very fertile and other areas which are deserts. They're watery deserts, but they're deserts in the sense that there are very few living things that exist there or produce there. At the present time, about 30 million tons of fish are caught annually in the world as a whole. I have great hope that we might increase this by as much as tenfold. Many people, as you know, have suggested that the ocean is a limitless source of food, but this is very far from the case. But it would be a very important part of the protein production.
Why can't you get more food than this?
The principal reason is the peculiar way in which animals and plants in the sea live. Everything in this earth depends upon the growth of plants, because plants are the only living things that can capture the energy of sunlight. Now, the plants in the sea, instead of looking like the grass in the field, are very small. They're microscopic in size, and they're designed so they can float in the water. The result is that the animals that eat the plants are also very small, about the size of the head of a pin. And the other animals eat those animals. Then the fish eat the animals that eat the animals that eat the plants. And finally, it's the fish that we ourselves catch and live on. And this long process is called a food chain, and each step in the chain is very inefficient. So the result is that we really never can hope, so far as I can see, to get anywhere near the same total quantity of food out of the ocean as we do out of the land.
We hear the term sea farming now. Can we fertilize the sea and help?
It is quite right that we may very well be able in the future to increase the fertility of certain parts of the sea by adding fertilizers or growth promoting substances to it. And if this is what you mean by farming, why, I think it will be possible, but it's not possible now in the open sea. We're still in the hunting economy, just like the primitive savage hunters of 5,000 or 10,000 years ago.
If there's a thing we call outer space, is not the sea a kind of inner or liquid space just as worthy of exploration for both peaceful and military purposes?
Both outer space and inner space are both parts of man's environment about which he is naturally very ignorant, principally because we've never been able either to get out into outer space or to go down into the depths of the sea. And it's just now becoming possible to do this. We're just now getting vehicles that can go down into the great depths, just as we're getting satellites and spaceships that can go out great distances from the Earth.
What are some of the benefits we might receive from better knowledge of ocean depths?
For example, better understanding and perhaps ultimately control of climate, increasing the harvest from the sea, maintaining the defenses of the United States.
What would you say is the most important thing yet to be learned from the ocean which would increase our security?
The ocean has always been a defense for the United States. The United States is essentially a big island in the middle of the world-girdling ocean. But at the present time, the ocean is liable to become an enemy rather than a friend, and this is because of the menace of the nuclear-powered, missile-carrying submarine. The submarine's in the hands of a potential enemy, and the great benefit that we can gain from a military point of view in effectively operating our own submarines.
Do we have a means of detecting enemy subs?
None of the means that you use to detect airplanes can be used to detect submarines. The surface of the ocean is really an iron curtain. We can't see through it, we can't send radar waves through it. We can't use any of the ordinary detecting means when we're above the surface and a submarine is below the surface. The only way we can aim a weapon at it is acoustically, by the use of sound. You have to know a great deal about the ocean to use sound effectively. And of course, this works both for our own submarines trying to operate against the enemy and for our attempts to detect or to track or to destroy potential enemy submarines operating against us.
Dr. Revelle, one last question. What are the implications of water on sustenance in the year 2000?
The population of human beings in the year 2000 will be pretty close to 6 billion people, more than twice the number of people we have now. And these people are likely to be desperately short of protein. And they'll just have to get this from the ocean. I would hope that by studying the ocean and studying the atmosphere, we will have learned so much more about climate that we'll be able actually to do something about climate.
Throughout history, then, man has found that his sustenance and security go hand in hand. Without food, he is weak. Without security, he is weak. And weakness invites his exploitation, subjugation, and enslavement by the merciless. Like the sea offers two choices of its bounty, we must take both, not just one. Every man has two main interests, and one of them is his security. He can choose the other, but without security, he can be sure of nothing.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina, with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
echo from the ages.
There is every reason to believe that the earliest superstitions grew out of pagan religions. Sun worship and moon worship were very important to primitive man. These heavenly bodies were viewed with great fear and respect, and it was believed that both had great powers to change human affairs. So thousands of beliefs sprang up about them.
That is a paragraph from a book called Superstitious. Here's Why, by Julie Batchelor and Claudia DeLise.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. There was once the man who asked the question, which came first, the hen or the egg? Anybody who believes this argument finally was resolved is not to be trusted, because it hasn't been resolved to my knowledge. It still crops up from time to time. The same is true of superstition. It's so old, one could ask which came first, superstition or people. Much of superstition depends on point of view. The loss of a foot must be bad luck to the rabbit, just as possession of a rabbit's foot is considered good luck by its possessor. Superstitions of the world, some silly, some fantastic, some horrible, are so deep they have been historic interferences with progress.
One Hindu in India has the reputation of being his country's poison king. When he hears someone has been bitten by a snake, he tears a piece of cloth in 6 pieces, ties the pieces into knots, and chants. The victim may be 1,000 miles away, but the poison king guarantees a cure if he hears about the bite in time.
My husband and I live on a farm in the Midwest, and we always plant our potatoes in the dark of the moon.
And in France, unless a child is born under the veil in Normandy, its chances of good luck and good life are remote.
Throughout history, common people and even some of the world's great leaders have been guided by superstitions. Umbrellas have been carried over heads of potentates in eastern countries for 9 centuries, not to ward off weather and sun, but to keep off evil spirits who were jealous and might attack great people. Hitler had his astrologer, and Sir Winston Churchill, the world's great political realist, once had an astrologer because he wanted to know what kind of advice Hitler was probably getting from his. Theatrical greats are still fearful of whistling in dressing rooms, and many a baseball pitcher won't go near the park on the day he's to go on the mound unless he sees either a load of hay or a load of beer barrels on the way.
Why is it bad luck to light 3 cigarettes on one match? This is one of modern life's most rigidly adhered to and honored superstitions. How many times have you seen the third person in line nervously blow out the match flame and ask for a new one? Many times, I'll bet. Maybe it had its origins earlier in some hard-to-trace moment. But it is a known fact that the greatest currency was given to it by Ivar Kruger, the Swedish match king and financier. He manufactured matches and wanted to sell them all over the world. It was he who urged that the rumor about 3 lights off one match being bad luck be circulated as widely as possible. The reason was simple. Every time he could get 3 people to light 2 matches instead of 1, it'd turn him a profit. It wasn't the bad luck which worried him as much as economics and improving his balance sheets.
Today we have other vested interests,
who use superstition and mystery to cloak their real aims. For instance, while America and the free world owe the preservation of world peace and freedom from global air attack to our possession of atomic weapons, the specter of atomic effects on future generations is used to try scaring us into throwing away the power which has ensured that peace. For some fancied danger in the far-off future, it serves some interest best to have us subject ourselves to the real danger weakness would bring upon us today. For my guest on this program, I've chosen the world's great lady of superstition, Claudia de Lis, author of more than a dozen books on the subject. Will you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Well, first I have 2 PhDs, though one would be enough, but first one is in Calcutta on social anthropology, and the second one in La Sorbonne at home, where I have comparative religion PhD, which helps me a great deal to get the background and the origin of these 80,000 superstitions that I have.
What would you say most often gives birth to superstitions?
Well, first we should define what superstition means. Fear is the basis of superstition, of all superstitions, and it is a fear of insecurity of one kind or another. It's a question of education. I feel that since emotions came first and reason afterward, the emotions are apt to fool us if we are not well grounded through the knowledge of cause and effect.
Do you have some modern example of superstition getting in the way of progress?
Well, I think it still does. I think there are controversial subjects. People are in each other's hair all the time. It's the hardest thing to launch a new thing. We have the Salk vaccine now, which is a proof in itself. People go reluctantly, and if they can avoid it, they can. But it's fear that prevents it. And fear is superstition. The slow progress of civilization has been due to superstition.
What is the basic element of this fear?
They have the fear of death, which is sort of basic. We all dread that final moment, but it only happens once, so I worry about it, because when it does happen, we won't know about it.
What is the most common worldwide manifestation of superstition?
Well, everyone has some fetish. We have a tremendous business all over the world on lucky charms. We carry various things, you know. We still worry about a black cat crossing our path, whether it's a horse cart or an automobile or what. And
well, do you think our space exploration will destroy or build more superstitions?
I think it will do something as far as the moon is concerned. I'm a little bit sorry about that, because it will really disturb a little bit of the romantic feelings we've had about this funny thing up there that looks upon us. So I think that it does destroy some of the things, but basically I think it will remove also some of these false illusions and perhaps enlarge the feeling of grandeur that people should know about the great pattern of the universe.
Don't you think this will give people greater horizons in many ways?
Perhaps give better value to the spiritual side of life, and not to be afraid of the unknown, because even when nobody has ever seen an atom, and yet we know it works. So we should have faith instead of fear in them, and trust in the hands of the experts that we have.
How much of superstition is cued to man's desire to simplify, to find an easy answer to something he doesn't understand?
Well, I think a man tries to rationalize his fears, you see, in one way or another. And to get rid of superstition, it will take a long time, because we have a long way to go before we are emotionally stable and intellectually capable of dismissing all these fears and phobias.
How much of the ancient superstitions are still with us?
The taboos of ancient times are with us in our customs, our beliefs, our etiquettes. Everything is pertaining to ancient fears, but now we understand why we put our fingers or our hand over our mouth when we yawn. It's not to keep the soul from getting out or the devil from getting in. It's because it looks more gracious.
North America prides itself on being better off intellectually than many parts of the world. Just how free is it of superstition by comparison with other less blessed places?
America is really full of superstitions of one kind or other. And these are passed on by the parents who do not rid themselves of those fears.
Do you have any evidence of superstition in Russia?
They are basically not as superstitious in the same sense, but they are fanatically superstitious about world conquest. Now, conquest feeling is a feeling of greed. Greed is due to insecurity.
Just how many superstitions are there, and how important are they considered to be? Well, in some parts of the world, government leaders refuse to do business on certain days. Some businessmen still believe good luck rides with the week which starts with a sale to the first customer who comes in on a Monday. And since money has come to mean so much, the superstitions about money are growing to a point where our people are trusting in good luck, personal and national, as an excuse for reluctance to spend for maximum needs in education and security. It was the German Iron Chancellor Bismarck who once said, "A special providence protects fools, drunkards, and the American people." While the American people are far from sure that this is true, and have the blemishes and bloodletting memories to prove otherwise, most are agreed that charms, symbols, and gestures are a poor substitute for applied effort, applied substance, and solid achievement. Now, one more question, Mr. Lease. What are your warnings about superstitions as we approach the year 2000?
Those who live by the fortune-telling yardstick, which takes in millions of dollars in this country, which could go to much better causes, if they could realize that 95% doesn't happen, only 5%, which is a very bad percentage, give up this wishful thinking, be practical, and when they don't know, ask, go to the source.
Hardly a one of us has grown up without the spooky punisher and parental aid known as the boogeyman. To some, he has 1,000 offspring, and they counsel from every angle of man's never-ending supply of fears. But it's wise to remember the counsel of a hard man of another era, Germany's Moltke, who said, "Luck in the long run is given only to the efficient."
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
echo from the ages.
If man began with speech, and civilization with agriculture, industry began with fire.
That was a statement by historian Will Durant.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. Not many people would pick up the dictionary for interesting reading, but one can play interesting games with it. The first word is nearly always aardvark, and the last, Zymergy. The aardvark is a burrowing African mammal, and Zymergy deals with the chemistry of fermentation for brewing. About halfway through, the word primordial appears, which refers to that which was first created or existed. Today, the highest type mammal, man, has a lot of interest in things brewing in the area of primordial power, or atomic energy. It's a basic element of the universe, found and enslaved by man so very recently. Its introduction to the world was first as a major secret of science, then a mammoth weapon of war.
The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. We won the race of discovery against the Germans. We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war.
That was President Truman's announcement after the August 6, 1945 introduction of the world's most powerful weapon. The almost immediate end of World War II was caused by Japanese fear of mounting destruction of life and property if they continued resistance. The American atomic advantage was turned to deterrence of the Soviet Union's inclination to continue the march and subjugate as many of the world's people as possible. In pursuit of peaceful purpose, the United States proposed to share this discovery with the world under conditions in which its peaceful use would be ensured. Russia was not interested, and her espionage apparatus had already penetrated the secrecy curtain, so if she had time, she could come up with her own weapon system, which she did. America still hoped to put the advantages of peaceful use foremost, and in 1953, President Eisenhower, in his first year as the head of a great power, made this proposal at the United Nations.
I know that the American people share my deep belief that if a danger exists in the world, it is a danger shared by all. And equally, that if hope exists in the mind of one nation, that hope should be shared by all. Finally, if there is to be advanced any proposal designed to ease, even by the smallest measure, the tensions of today's world, what more appropriate audience could there be than the members of the General Assembly of the United Nations?
And then he spoke of America's atomic teeth.
In size and variety, the development of atomic weapons has been no less remarkable. The development has been such that atomic weapons have virtually achieved conventional status within our armed services. The secret is possessed by our friends and allies, Great Britain and Canada, whose scientific genius made a tremendous contribution to our original discoveries and the designs of atomic bombs. The secret is also known by the Soviet Union. The free world, at least dimly aware of these facts, has naturally embarked on a large program of warning and defense systems.
And then he threw some light up a new pathway for this mighty force.
The United States knows that peaceful power from atomic energy is no dream of the future. That capability, already proved, is here, now, Today, who can doubt if the entire body of the world's scientists and engineers had adequate amounts of fissionable material with which to test and develop their ideas, that this capability would rapidly be transformed into universal, efficient, and economic usage.
From that time forward, there have been continuing developments in the peaceful sectors of man's exploration. Such words as atomic isotopes, atomic reactors, atomic-powered vehicles have been common to man's knowledge. He has grown to expect greater and greater things of this atomic power. In the summer of 1959, there was another Eisenhower who participated in this quest for peaceful use of atomic energy. The occasion was in Philadelphia, and we now pick up New York shipbuilding president, Louis Wolfson.
UNS Savannah, the world's first lady of nuclear-powered merchant shipping, should be christened by the First Lady of our land. It is now my happy privilege to introduce to you Mrs. Dwight D. Eisenhower and to express to her the thanks for her being so gracious to be here today, and it is an honor.
I christen thee, Savannah.
But while President Eisenhower had made his plea for universal acceptance of the idea of peaceful uses, there was enough reluctance on the part of the Soviet Union that weapons testing had to continue apace. In 1957, on one of several summer mornings, a sound like this cracked out over Yucca Flats in Nevada. With this and other kinds of atomic weapons going into the North American Air Defense Command, I asked the then Commander-in-Chief of NORAD, General Earl E. Partridge, what this weapon meant to our air defense improvement, and he said,
It's the most important development since the introduction of radar, and naturally, we are delighted to have the weapon in our inventory.
And how safe is it?
It's probably the safest weapon ever developed. It has so many safety factors built into it that we don't see how you can have an accidental explosion with it.
We have reluctantly accepted the philosophy in America that when nations cannot ensure their safety by peaceful agreement, with proper inspection and other safeguards, then we will pursue the peaceful avenue while keeping our guard at the highest peak of efficiency and ready. Meantime, as we go on, here's our next guest. Would you identify yourself, please?
Well, I'm Charles Critchfield, and by training I'm a physicist, mathematical physicist, director of scientific research at Convair in San Diego.
Do we at present know enough to build and power a vehicle to make a discovery run within our own solar system to a place like Mars or Venus?
Yes, we have the know-how. It's strictly a matter of funds and time.
Since you were one of the builders of the atomic bomb, where would you say we are in relation to space flight in comparison to that crash quest for the atomic explosion?
Well, to make that comparison, I'd say that we're past the Stagg Field era on which the chain reaction was proven. With the same amount of money, I think we could go into space in about the same time. That's 2 or 3 years.
Well, what will be the nature of power or combinations of power needed?
Oh, what we use now is sufficient. Chemical, liquid fuels or solid propellants as they come along. And for explorations in the immediate part of the solar system, we don't have to go to more exotic things, but to go farther away. The economy of the fuel is such that you probably have to go to nuclear fuel.
If the atomic reactor is going to be the basic power unit for great distances, what would you say the size and weight would be for, well, say, a trip to Venus with a man aboard?
I would estimate the weight to be 1 or 2 million pounds at the takeoff, based on a guess that you need about 100 pounds for every pound that you want to get there and get back. The size would be about twice the size of what we're now using for the Atlas.
We think we know quite a bit about the solar system, but how much chance is there that we'll be surprised along the discovery route by additional findings, like Columbus was?
We're just beginning to find out that we knew very little about what comes off the sun in the way of radiations and ejections of matter, and that I think we're in for many more surprises. In fact, more surprises than Columbus found. After all he found is just a different bunch of trees and things.
What will be the military implications of the space medium?
Well, I consider it a military responsibility to be in control. And by that I mean if somebody put something up there and we didn't like it, we could do something about it. Either destroy it or catch it and bring it back and check it.
Well, what then, in your opinion, do you think will be the situations being dealt with in this area in the year 2000?
But that's 40 years from now, isn't it? And it would be my guess that the world 40 years from now will be as different from what it is today as we are different from the world 400 years ago.
While it's the wish of all men that primordial or atomic power will find the way into solar secrets for us, just as men once had to pry into its own existence, it's been practical for us to proceed on both peaceful and military courses simultaneously. Man is the most habit-forming of all animal life, and maybe one day he'll form the habit of peace for its own profitable sake. Until that time, he is forming the habit of protecting himself militarily to ensure that he can explore, experiment, and develop boons to mankind peacefully.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
echo from the ages.
Primitive drums and smoke and echoes from mountainsides were some of the first means used by man to project his ability to communicate out of the normal range of his voice. Drums were probably first, because man initially feared fire.
This was taken from an archaeologist's notes written long ago.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. When a man named Lazar Ludovich Zamenhof was born just a little more than 100 years ago in Bialystok, a frontier town near Poland, Lithuania, and Byelorussia, his earliest memories were a babble of languages. Local officials spoke in Russian, the nobility in Polish, the peasants in Lithuanian and Byelorussian, and the shopkeepers in Yiddish. From this welter of inability to communicate completely between peoples in one small city, he became interested in developing a common language. Being adept at many languages himself, he eventually wrote a book about a common tongue which he signed with the pen name of Dr. Esperanto, and that common language became known as Esperanto. It started with 904 roots, from which 10,000 words could be formed. The fascination of men for communications, from earliest time, has taken many forms. The International Morse Code is used throughout the world.
Hello?
The telephone was first to transmit voice great distances. And from the payloads fired aloft with great missiles, the strange voices of telemetry came back to us from as far away as the moon. Communications have come to mean the important contribution to our deterrence posture in their ability to take surprise out of an enemy air attack. Without surprise, even the dullest enemy planner can easily visualize the losses he would suffer fighting his way into the North American target system, were it fully alerted against him. As communications have improved our defenses against manned air attack, refinements in these communications are being brought about daily, striving for an answer to the much faster moving intercontinental ballistic missile threat, which is now pointed at us from sites in Russia and Siberia.
From where I sit here in the Combat Operations Center of the North American Air Defense Command in Colorado Springs, Colorado, it is easy to see we need some fast, hard work to provide us with a means of fighting off an intercontinental ballistic missile attack. This means we not only have to have the weapon, which can move fast enough to do it, but we need the improved radar to see the missile and the guidance system to ensure its destruction.
That was Colonel R.L. Gould, Director of the Combat Operations Center of the North American Air Defense Command. This is one of the protective military forces at work in the Western world today to ensure that men can not only communicate with each other in better, more far-reaching ways, but also to ensure that men are around to explore new means of communication with each other. To find out just how widely mankind is currently able to make contact with his fellows, I'm going to ask you to listen in on a recent speech by Dr. J.R. Pierce of the Bell Laboratories in New Jersey.
Well, in all civilized countries, there are adequate communications within land masses. People in Europe can communicate with one another. They have television across the borders of their country. They can communicate with Great Britain. But the ocean forms a barrier. It has been partially spanned by submarine cables to give high-quality broadcast circuits as well as telephone circuits.
How many people would you think are out of reach of this means of contact? Here is Dr. Pierce continuing.
There are still many billions of people, I suppose, with whom we do not even have the quality of telephone circuits that we have within the continental United States. And as yet, we have no broadband television circuits. We cannot instantaneously see some important event abroad, and it's here that satellites may help us. But it is quite possible that with adequate research, satellite communication will come into being as a practical thing, will span the oceans, and will enable us both to hear and see people in all parts of the world.
For those who fear that many of the answers we seek in current explorations and experiments are only useful for military purposes, it's fairly obvious that peaceful use of most of the discoveries is possible to an even greater degree. While a communications satellite in the sky has military surveillance capabilities, it can also open the whole of the Earth's surface to broadcasting and telecasting beams, to telephone and telegraphy in a degree not now possible. Here's my next guest. Will you identify yourself, please?
Well, I'm K.J. Bassert, assistant to the Vice President Engineering of Convair, located in San Diego.
Your company, along with many others, is working on the communication satellite program. Since this will be a tremendously expensive feat, how many will be required?
The higher you go, the fewer satellites you need, but also the better optical equipment you need in order to observe a certain feature on the Earth. Now, regarding the 24-hour orbit, the satellite takes 24 hours to go around, which is the same time it takes for the Earth to go around.
Where, in relation to the Earth, does this satellite have to be established?
Over the equator. In a so-called 24-hour orbit, it will always be over the same spot, which is a rather interesting trick.
Well, how high is that 24-hour orbit?
That one is 22,000 miles high. For radio, this is quite feasible. For all practical purposes, such a satellite would be stationary in space. It would be stationary anyway to an observer who is on the surface of the Earth. And therefore, it can be used as a communication relay, a radio communication relay. It could be used to relay television programs, for instance. It will always be there. You can use a narrow beam in your broadcast because you know exactly where to point it, and your target will stay there. From the standpoint of communication, either commercial or military, this is very important.
Could you expand on that a bit?
The existing channels of communication today are getting overburdened. We're sending more messages than we can conveniently absorb with the means we have. So here then we have the possibility of adding new channels of communication. We have the additional benefit that these kind of communications are very difficult to be jammed. It is difficult, virtually impossible, for an enemy to interfere with such a beam.
What is the minimum number of satellites which would be needed 22,000 miles up?
You need a minimum of 3 satellites, you see, so that satellites 2 and 3 can always see satellite number 1 and relay whatever they receive from the ground.
How fast does this trio of satellites have to go just to stay in place?
It goes some 10,000 feet per second.
Would such a communications link as this, exposing the whole Earth's surface, have an effect on man's ultimate communications dream, a world language?
if you mean by universal language, is it a language by which everybody would use when they want to intercommunicate? The answer is definitely yes. As a matter of fact, I think English today is, to a very large extent, already this universal language.
The forerunner of these communications developments has already become an accomplished public fact, and it was in English. Do you recall the time in 1958 when the world was electrified by this voice broadcasting from an orbit in space?
This is the President of the United States speaking. Through the marvels of scientific advance, my voice is coming to you from a satellite circling in outer space.
At this point, I'm going to ask Carol Bossert to point out some of the implications of communications and its language on the year 2000.
There is a nationalistic pride involved, in changing your language. As a matter of fact, I think English today is, to a very large extent, already this universal language. Although, of course, we probably will get some competition from the Russian, maybe even from the Chinese. And I would say that it would behoove us, if we're going to go into this worldwide coverage by radio and TV and so forth, to get there first. Otherwise, it might well happen that the other language, Russian, might become the universal language, which would be most unfortunate for us Americans, because we certainly are not adept at taking on new languages.
So no matter how far mankind has come from smoke signals and drums, the distances he can still go to improve his lot, his safety, and his riches make us appear to be only on the threshold. By communications, he can be better informed, universally knowledgeable, less likely to be surprised, detect more opportunities for human enterprise.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
echo from the ages.
Early doctors tried to scare off possessing demons or sicknesses by assuming terrifying masks, covering themselves with skins of animals, shouting, raving, slapping their hands, shaking rattles, and even sucking out the demon through a hollow tube. An old adage says, nature cures the disease, while the remedy amuses the patient.
This statement comes from a chapter by historian Will Durant on the origin of medicine and medical practices.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. Some years ago, when Madeline Carroll was a reigning queen of Hollywood, she was making a personal appearance in New York. As a part of her schedule, she visited the Columbia University School of Journalism, where she was the main feature of a press conference to be carried out by the embryo newspapermen. One of them posed the usual college boy question. "Miss Carroll," he asked, "if you were going to be shipwrecked on a desert island with a man, what kind of a man would you choose?" Madeline's answer was quick and sure. Who, she asked in return, but an obstetrician. Even as a desert island might have its requirements for medical specialization, then similar hard and realistic facts face us today which will want medical specialization for their solution. One of the small headlines which attracted great interest in 1960 was,
In Los Angeles today, the president-elect of the American Medical Association predicted a race of superhuman beings who can expect to live 125 years or more. His name, Dr. Vincent Askey. He said, it is conceivable that couples 90 years old will still be having babies, and that within the next 25 years, man will know how to depress harmful heredity characteristics through control of cell chemistry.
One of the most interesting medical capitals in the world is the Aerospace Medical Center, the School of Aviation Medicine at Brooks Air Force Base near San Antonio, Texas. Where once it concerned itself with the peculiar stresses on men in flight in the atmosphere, it has for years been edging man's foot over the threshold and into space via theory, experiment, tying vision to practicality. Those famous monkeys named Sam, who made space flights, didn't come by that common name by accident. S is for school, A for aviation, and M for medicine. On the successes of monkey and other animal flights are built the data and experience factors which will pave the way for the astronauts into space flights. As I talk, you hear the heartbeat of one of the astronauts as he is being prepared to simulate the gravity pressures of 10 times the Earth's gravity pull in a man-made whirling merry-go-round called a centrifuge in Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
We are going to carry out a simulation of the launch phase. You will report telelight panels and altitude on the way out, and then G versus time of the exit phase.
Roger. Understand.
You'll then hold until you get the start retro sequence light, come about and get into the retro fire position. You will hold this position until you get in retro attitude light, at which time you will fire your retro rockets. This will decelerate you and bring you down out of orbit.
And besides the astronaut, there are instructions to an intent observer, the medical officer.
Will the medical officer please operate his IC stop button? It operates. File, will you push and release your IC stop button? It operates.
Now he talks to the astronaut.
Would you take a deep breath, please? All right, exhale. All right, take a breath and strain. The purpose of this was to calibrate the medical officer's breathing apparatus where he was recording the strain. The strain technique is used to increase the G tolerance.
When all observers, including the medical officer, are satisfied, the launch is ready.
All right, go ahead with the countdown procedure, Vic.
We are ready to fire. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. Launch oxygen line on.
The pilot is reporting the completion of the automatic procedures as they occur and are displayed on his camera.
Back to 30,000 feet. 50,000 feet, 3G. 70,000 feet, about 3.5 G. 90,000 feet, a little short of 4G.
Before a man could safely do all this, and so matter-of-factly, animal heartbeats experienced the pressures first. This is the heartbeat of a mouse. One of the space medicine elder statesmen is a German-born enthusiast and philosopher in this field. He has done much to chart the way of the Aerospace Medical Center. He is my next guest. Will you identify yourself, please?
I am Dr. Hubertus Struckold, advisor for research to the commander of the Aerospace Medical Center at Brooksfield, Texas.
While a great deal of future in flight belongs to engineers in providing vehicles and power, what are the areas in which medicine is interesting itself in behalf of men in space?
First, we are interested in the environment of space itself. That means space between the various celestial bodies. The space between the Earth and Moon, or the Earth and the neighboring planets, Venus and Mars. From the medical point of view, space begins at about 12 miles. Secondly, we are especially interested in the differences and variations in various parts of the space environment. The existence of a great radiation belt.
Is the job of getting a man in space one of his comfort or preservation of his health?
I would say both. We are concerned in his health, that he does not suffer any hazards or injuries from the external environment of space. But on the other hand, we are also very much concerned in his comfort. He should be as comfortable as possible.
If it's now possible for us to place a man in a very isolated condition at the Arctic dew line stations for the North American Air Defense Command, will it be possible for us to similarly isolate a man in a patrolling space vehicle in the future without physiological or psychological complications?
I do not think that in a space vehicle the isolation is so complete as, for instance, in the Arctic. He sees a wonderful visual panorama, so there is something to see in space, so that the isolation is not the same as in the Arctic.
Is there a medical aspect of this isolation?
This is a very important problem, isolation, especially over longer periods of time. And because of this, we probably must demand from a medical point of view that space technology does something to shorten the time of space operations, the duration of space operations, for instance, concerning a trip to one of the neighboring planets.
Have you any way of knowing whether the Russians are engaged in similar studies of medicine?
Yes, they have several institutions in Moscow, in Kiev, in which they study the space component in aviation medicine. And then they have also some institutions in which they study astrobiology, a field which is concerned with the possibility of life on other celestial bodies.
Undoubtedly, space medicine has already had a big influence on all medical thinking. If it could be military experiments, which led to the defeat of the killing power of yellow fever, then it's probable that space medicine may pave a path to some of the cures which have so far eluded men. Dr. Strugol, what do you see as the medical implications of the year 2000?
This extraterrestrial trend in medical thinking will have a great influence upon medicine in general and upon our whole life. Instrumentation will be different and will be very strongly influenced by the development in astronautics and bioastronautics or space medicine. Everything is based on miniaturization in volume and minimization in weight. This will have some effect upon the medical instrumentation in hospitals. It might be possible in some years that hospitals and physicians can use communication satellites for communication between one hospital and the other about a certain patient. So there will be a great influence.
So, as medicine was once the realm of the witch doctor, it is now progressing into exotic and bewitching fields as broad as the universe itself. The missile which will one day put man in his first orbit has about 300,000 inanimate parts. Even more complicated man, who will do the orbiting and ultimately space exploration, has to be understood better. He must be better protected for health and life than the machine refinements to both put him there and, equally as important, bring him back to tell about it.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
from the ages.
No matter how far back we go, mankind's first consciousness is of being transported. He was carried by his mother before he was born, and afterward by her until he could walk. Only in animal life is there a combination of such nature for reproduction and transport.
This was a statement of a classroom instructor in an Eastern university in 1780.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. One of man's most interesting triumphs has been in connection with vehicles. The youthful bicycle rider still yells, "Look, Ma, no hands." The airborne speedster is proud of the minutes and seconds by which he and his vehicle beat the best time in existence before his own exploit. It's through vehicles and vehicle engineering that man has been able to go beyond himself, to do more things than his own native capacities can provide by themselves. As we face to the future, much depends on refinements and sophistications of vehicles. Here is General Bernard Schriever, Commander, Air Research and Development Command, commenting on this.
Space vehicles, ballistic missiles are new, they're glamorous, and they have caught the fancy of the American people. Yet on the other hand, they are very important vehicles for the national security, and as we go further down the line time-wise, they will play a more and more important part for maintaining the deterrent posture which is so vital to our continued survival.
Will these ballistic missiles have other than military capabilities?
Yes, I think all of the ballistic missiles will be used as boosters for space work. All of these boosters will have a very valuable part to play in our continued space effort.
It's popular in some quarters to be concerned about the military emphasis in various aspects of the space project, to translate the presence of military men as meaning that only the warlike angle is being pursued. Along these lines, I turn to nuclear and mathematical physicist Dr. Charles Critchfield of Convair in San Diego. How about this high percentage of military presence in space activities, Dr. Critchfield?
But this is a kind of an operation that compares with military operations. It's hazardous to the individuals that are concerned, of course, assuming that men would have to go on these Buck Rogers things. But we absolutely have to do it.
How big will one of these vehicles have to be to take a man on a Venus trip?
I would estimate the weight to be 1 or 2 million pounds at the takeoff. This is based on a guess that you need about 100 pounds for every pound that you want to get there and get back.
The search and research effort continues to hunt for the means of guaranteeing that man will live through the initial exploratory stages, and that his protection will be commonplace in the advanced stages. One of the experimentations in this area is with nose cones, the search for materials which will resist and ward off destructive heat in extremely high ranges. Here is Mark Morton of the General Electric Company in Philadelphia, standing beside a charred, recovered nose cone which was successfully flown, describing whether nose cones could sustain life of man in space.
Very definitely. There is, in the first place, a good deal of delicate equipment inside. The inside temperature is controlled.
In addition to this, the size of the cone, its weight, being well over a ton with a payload capability well over 600 pounds, and its size being over 12 feet with a 5-foot diameter, could, with the proper equipment, have definitely supported life.
The Soviet Union is proudest of one kind of graduate in its schools, the engineer. The communist politician long ago realized that dogma might be all right, but modern developments and achievements would go a long way to reinforce it. America's engineers, who have changed the face of the world as our fathers knew it, are still hard at work on more changes. They are concerned with the numbers of engineers being produced in the schools of North America, and the quality, because in them is represented America's follow-on capability. Rather than emphasize and therefore discourage a future engineer by bearing down on curriculum difficulties, today's engineering leaders are pointing to some of the future challenges of technical ability and imagination, which temptingly lie in the upcoming decades. To illustrate this, here's my next guest from Burbank, California. Will you identify yourself, please?
This is Hall L. Hibbard, Senior Vice President for Engineering, Lockheed Aircraft Corporation.
You were one of those fortunate people who knew exactly what he wanted to do when he was still in school. You wanted to be in the airplane business. How far short did you fall in anticipating what was to come in your career, the kinds of vehicles you'd be working on?
I'm sure I didn't come even close to envisioning the state of air sciences today. As a boy, I thought in terms of flying only. And now, of course, we're concerned with space projects and all of the problems related to man's mastery of this new dimension. As for heading an engineering department someday, I'm sure I never gave that a thought. You said I was fortunate to know early in life what I wanted to be, and I was. I was fortunate to be deeply interested in the field of aviation. I was concerned with the work, not where or what it would bring me. You know, I've observed this attitude of mind in many, many engineers. Their work is the important thing to them. They are so engrossed in it that many of these men don't even know how much money they make.
If you had the opportunity to pick talent being produced in the schools, which ones would be of most use to you today in vehicle engineering?
Well, I would say physicists certainly would come first, for this science is very basic to our efforts. And chemists are becoming more and more important with our rocketry and the special fuels required for travel into space. And then mathematicians. We do need mathematicians for work in many, many fields.
There's a great deal of uncertainty and not a little impatience among students today. Do you have any practical guidance for them?
Generally on the subject of education, I want to recommend to young people today that they take all the schooling they possibly can. Our lives and work now require it. Finish high school, then by all means finish college. Study as long as you can and get as many degrees as you can. And whatever you do, don't be impatient. This investment of time, effort, and money will be repaid you many, many times over.
Your company, Lockheed, has built us many of the planes and instruments which have been helpful in the air defense of North America up to the present time. What do you see as some of the challenges of engineers in providing future safety from an enemy using the aerospace medium?
The engineer has a very real responsibility in this regard, to work constantly to make our weapons better and better, continually improved, and always so formidable that an enemy would not dare to attack. I do not believe there is any such thing as absolute safety, just as it seems unlikely that there is any ultimate weapon. Our safety is in our strength to deter.
So in the area of vehicle engineering, science fiction of old is becoming engineering facts of today. What were once the fanciful doodles of the engineering visionaries, and were once described as none such artwork, because there really was no such thing, are now being welded together in reality. As medicine tries out men in sealed capsules to determine what it does to them physiologically and psychologically, engineers make adjustments in their vehicles to accommodate them. Like everything else, there's both a military and peaceful application. Now, one more question to Hall Hibbard. What are the implications of vehicle engineering at the year 2000?
Well, it will be as different then as today is from Kitty Hawk in 1903. Imagination wasn't big enough then to encompass the meaning and potential of the Wright brothers' flight. And I'm sure it isn't strong enough today to see 40 years ahead to the year 2000. We can be sure only that there will be a comparable period of progress. Oh, there are certain things that are near enough at hand to be predictable. For example, the family automobile will be going out of style. We will have taken to the air. Commuters will fly at 500 or 600 miles an hour to their city-centered jobs from homes in resort areas several hundred miles away. Their airborne vehicles will be very simple and safe to operate and will follow largely prearranged traffic patterns. And intercontinental flight will be by rocket, traveling a ballistic trajectory which will probably reach 200 miles above the Earth at its highest point. And man will have traveled in space by that time. He will have visited the moon easily and gone beyond. It's how far beyond that is difficult to say.
Today's 5-year-old boy, who can fold a paper plane which will sail by the propulsion of his throwing arm, has riding on his shoulders, his brain, and his imagination some of the things which are today denied our vehicle engineers. As the processors pay attention to him, parents and pedagogues alike, so may they assure that he attracts the attention of the world in that time ahead.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
from the ages.
We may perhaps learn to deprive large masses of their gravity and give them absolute levity for the sake of easy transport.
That was a statement by Ben Franklin, written in the 18th century.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. Everything you've done today, from stepping on the bathroom scales to lifting your hands, has been influenced by an ever-present phenomena called gravity. While it was in the 17th century that Sir Isaac Newton, after being hit on the head with a falling apple, put down on paper his famous law of gravitation, he was only stating something which for years had dogged men who dreamed of escaping the Earth's surface. In his famous book, Principia, in 1686, Newton went further and had a drawing made showing a cannon firing a cannonball from the top of the mountain. Each time the cannonball was fired further out until at last it no longer fell to the ground, but around the earth in a continuing falling action. He had concluded this from the severely disciplined course of the planets around the sun and the moon about the earth. He put his finger on the principle of orbiting a satellite that long ago. He had only to wait for man to produce the power. To talk a little about gravity and its meaning today, our first guest is K.J. Bossert of Convair in San Diego, California. Mr. Bossert, what are some of the problems facing mankind which call for the outwitting of gravity?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question in this way, because this gives me a chance to put across a point that is not often understood by people. You see, actually, there is two ways of, as you put it, outwitting gravity. Thousands of years ago, men outwitted gravity whenever they threw a rock. For that matter, whenever a monkey threw a coconut, he outwitted gravity. The other way is to oppose the force of gravity by an equal and opposite force, such as, for instance, when you fly an airplane. You oppose the weight of the airplane, the gravitational force. You oppose it by a lifting force.
So have we run completely away from the man-throwing-a-rock principle?
It is a strange thing that in the space age, when we go into space, we go back to the old, primitive way of overcoming gravity, like the man throwing a rock. We overcome gravity by energy, by, if you want to be technical, we call it kinetic energy, the energy that goes with speed, with velocity.
What are some of the problems, then?
Well, first of all, we'd like to perfect the ways we're using now. Our rockets can be made more efficient, for instance, by using better fuels. The Centaur missile, for instance, uses liquid hydrogen for fuel, which is a great step forward in the fight against gravity. We are able, with our present means, to our present techniques, to create speeds that are sufficient to overcome the gravity of the Earth. All it takes is some 7 miles per second velocity.
There is another aspect of gravity which I endured myself, the condition known as zero gravity or weightlessness. While we accept such things as air pressure of 14 pounds per square inch and the gravity of our own weight, it's a strange feeling when one or the other departs us. Once in a pressure chamber, when I was taken to an altitude of about 55,000 feet, only a tight girdle kept me from swelling a few times normal size. Once in a state of weightlessness, I free-floated for 21 seconds. This is an odd, disoriented state indeed. If man is to go into space, lack of gravity is one of the factors he must live with. My next guest is Dr. Hubertus Strughold of the Aerospace Medical Center near San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Struckhole, will man's mental outlook change in these circumstances?
This is very difficult to say. I do not think that in such short trips around the Earth, as it is intended in the Mercury project, that this will have some effect on his mental attitude and so on. But I think in some longer space operations, which take perhaps several months, he might develop a kind of extraterrestrial cosmic attitude.
Will he feel exhilarated or depressed by this new combination of factors?
He might, in the beginning, be exhilarated by this visual panorama which he sees and experiences. He might, after some time, become indifferent, but it is difficult to make any statement with regard to, let's say, depression or something like this.
Let's say we're going to cross the continent one day in a rocket airliner. How long would the feeling of no gravity or weightlessness persist in a trip from New York to Los Angeles?
Probably around 20 minutes. And then this vehicle would glide down and would gain weight again very slowly until it has the passengers have their normal weight, let's say some 50 miles before the landing place.
It seems to me that at some point there would be a feeling somewhat like the start down in a fast elevator. How long would this sensation continue?
This is a very interesting question. You read sometimes in the astronautical literature that coasting, let's say around the Earth, is a constant falling, permanent falling around the Earth. And this might produce a kind of nightmare.
It sounds kind of nightmarish to me, too.
There is a difference between physical falling and the physiological reactions. It is true in the physical sense, it is a constant falling around the Earth in an orbit. But physiologically, probably an astronaut has only in the first 10 seconds or so the feeling of falling. And then they come into a new state of equilibrium. And I do not think that the astronauts have constantly the feeling of falling.
Gravity, however, is a many-sided, many-directional phenomenon. It's the various attractions of solar and celestial bodies, one for the other, or several of them for one, which keeps the universe in its multitude of constant relationships without collision. It pulls at men. It pulls at things. Gravity determines how much of the Earth's atmosphere is held around it, and this determines how high evaporated seawater is pulled, and how far carried, and where deposited as rain or snow. In our tomorrows, gravity will determine how we talk with each other. Here's K.J. Bossert again.
Once we escape the gravitation of the Earth, we still have to cope with the gravitation of other celestial bodies, and particularly the gravitation of the Sun.
How do we get up enough speed to oppose this attracting force of the Sun?
The only way we are able to attain such speeds is to make use of the velocity of the Earth itself around the Sun, which already exists. This is a velocity of some 18 miles per second. This puts severe limitations on the possibility of space travel. We can only hope with today's technique to overcome the gravitation of the Sun by traveling or by leaving the Earth in the same direction as the Earth is already traveling around the Sun. So doing, we make use of these 18 miles per second the Earth has already.
There are many plans to have satellite or orbiting and patrolling space vehicles for military missions to protect us and for communications purposes. What are the problems in this from a gravity angle?
If we're going to use satellites to do reconnaissance, to do a sentry job, we should have many of them. And the information may be either sent directly back to the ground or may have to be relayed from one satellite to another. Now, the number of satellites you need to do this job depends mostly on the altitude at which you're going to fly. If you establish a satellite over the equator in a so-called 24-hour orbit, it will always be over the same spot. That one is 22,000 miles high.
So as gravity holds man down, it gives him and his instrument certain predictability when he's up. He cannot ever completely or constantly escape its clutches, but he can make it do useful labor in his behalf. At the turn of this century, such was the healthy respect of gravity of H.G. Wells, the far-out thinker and writer of his day, that he predicted man might fly before 1950, but would never have learned to land safely. By the year 2000, the things we say today about gravity and what it will be doing for and against man may be equally as short-sighted. Between Earth's gravity itself and atmospheric pressure, the height of a tree and the weight of an elephant on Earth are decided. But away from the Earth and outside atmosphere lies a galaxy not yet subdued, but to which other celestial brands of gravity may be the key. Once men said everything which goes up must come down. This may no longer be true because gravity can be made to ensure that that which can go up can also go out into the far reaches of the universe.
This has been Face to the Future, a transcribed series on this station, produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command and featuring Delvina with her parade of interesting guests. Be with us next time as we put our face to the future.
Echo from the ages.
Many primitive tribes had no other government than that of each family by its head. In case of strife, they chose their bravest warrior to lead them and obeyed him strictly. But once the conflict was ended, they literally sent him about his business. In the intervals of peace, it was the priest or head magician who had the most authority and influence.
That was a statement from Will Durant's book, The Story of Civilization, referring to the habits and customs of earliest man.
This is Face to the Future, a new transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command. Its conductor is Delvina, well-known broadcaster, author, lecturer, a lady of adventure as well. It's Face to the Future. And here is our hostess, Delvina.
Welcome again to Face to the Future. It's the nature of man that he puts off seeing the doctor until he's ill or in pain, the dentist until he has cavities, and the insurance man until he feels he can afford it or really needs it. History is likewise filled with occasions in which he has been inclined only to rely on military advice and strength when he hears the first explosion, signaling the beginning of war. Then the age-old cry goes up, why didn't somebody tell us these things when there was time to do something about it? Usually, plenty of people have been saying these things. In the spring of 1955, after a speech by the Continental Air Defense Commander in Los Angeles, only Walter Winchell paid much attention.
Reporters report to the people, Los Angeles, California. General B.W. Chidlaw is the chief of the Continental Air Defense Command. General Chidlaw this week declared that in the not-too-distant future, robot bomber planes would be a reality. He said they can cruise at supersonic speeds of 1,500 to 2,200 miles per hour, and that within 10 years, the Reds would have the ability to develop an intercontinental missile with an 8,000 to 16,000 miles per hour speed capable of bombing any American city. These powerful Red robots, he added, would be only 30 minutes by air from Soviet sites. 30 minutes by air from Soviet sites. For reporting the very same news in much more conservative language, 6 years before Korea, this reporter was called an hysterical alarmist and warmonger on many American editorial pages.
That was in the early spring of 1955, and General Chidlaw, now retired, was functioning as America's first air defense commander-in-chief. He said within 10 years, and on January 21st, in 1960, legions of other commentators were reporting a fact.
From Moscow today comes the announcement that the Russians fired a rocket 7,760 miles into the Central Pacific. It fell less than 1.25 miles from its calculated target. It traveled at the speed of 16,150 miles an hour.
The distance the rocket traveled is interesting to any North American concerned with the safety of himself and his family, because it means that all of the continent, down to and including the Panama Canal Zone, is within range. The fact that an air defense commander could predict the time period in which this would happen 5 years before it did means that such professional advice merits attention, because the time lag to develop military hardware as the equalizer is long. Today, however, there are many who argue in behalf of offensive striking power at the expense of everything else, particularly complementary defensive weapons, which would actually protect the people of North America while the offensive strikes were being made upon an enemy. You may remember in an earlier segment of Face to the Future that Colonel R.L. Gould said,
"From where I sit here in the Combat Operations Center of the North American Air Defense Command in Colorado Springs, Colorado, it is easy to see we need some fast, hard work to provide us with a means of fighting off an intercontinental ballistic missile attack. This means we not only have to have the weapon, which can move fast enough to do it, but we need the improved radar to see the missile and the guidance system to ensure its destruction.
It's pretty well understood by everyone that the combined efforts of the free world, in the military sense, particularly in Canada and the United States, intend that military power exists in peace to preserve that peace. It has the secondary capability of giving a fighting, decisive account of itself should peace fail us, or the policy of war deterrence fail us. In the latter case, most people know that the strategic air power of America would, if we were attacked, launch itself to destroy targets in the aggressor country. But one stark fact remains. North America would have been attacked first. Your sole protection, if this war would come, would be the arsenal of the North American Air Defense Command. To discuss this military element so vital to our safety, I asked NORAD's Commander-in-Chief, General Lawrence S. Cuter, to describe it.
NORAD is a air defense command of Canadian and American forces. It consists of the air defense elements of the United States Army, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. And its mission is a very simple one. It is to defend North America against air attack. To accomplish that mission, we have some 200,000 people, a little more than 200,000, involved day after day around the clock in the air defense of North America, and an additional 70,000 or so Reserve, National Guard, and other military air defense units which we can call up in an emergency. These people, something like 270,000, are based in some 700 different places.
Where are these places?
In North America, the 700 places extend from the Arctic coast southward to the southern border of the United States, from Midway Island in the mid-Pacific on eastward to the Azores in the eastern Atlantic.
How capable are the forces of the Soviet Union at this time?
The Soviet Air Force, I have seen recently in radar screens in the Pacific from northern Japan on down through Okinawa. We've watched them training, we watched them at work. They're big and they're good. The bombers of the Soviet Air Force comprise a serious threat to security in North America. That's the prime threat today. There is another threat. The ballistic missile of the Russian is today a threat. It is a secondary one, but a real threat. It won't be long, in my opinion. It will be within 2 or 3 years that the manned bomber of Russia and the Russian ballistic missile become approximately equal threats. And I think it's quite likely in the later 60s that we'll find the ballistic missile of the Russian the prime threat, the manned bomber the secondary threat. But I'd like to point the fact that then, as now, we have two threats. We have a requirement for defense against both. The fact that the manned bomber in the later 60s becomes a secondary threat does not mean that it becomes a threat to be ignored. It can be secondary but still fatal. There are two threats.
The world has recently been treated to a whole parade of statements by Khrushchev about junking bombers, cutting forces, and other seemingly peaceful actions. Is this true?
Yes, he did. He said bombers were obsolete and navies were made to be sunk. Mr. Khrushchev has many opinions. This is only one of them that I do not subscribe to.
Do you think he really believes he has an obsolete Air Force?
I'm not a bit sure he's told his Air Force that. from their performance in the radar screens, they don't know they're obsolete.
The job of providing national and international security is as exacting and demanding as any other profession. As a dentist can warn of an approaching cavity, the military man can warn of a weapons or missile lag. Whether the dentist is called for an appointment for preventive measures or whether you become concerned for your safety as a citizen in time, calls for individual response. Up ahead lies the year 2000, and your children who enter kindergarten this fall will be 45 then, making decisions of professionally high order. I've asked NORAD planner, Colonel Dick Carlisle, for predictions of the military implications of that time.
As military forces are now deployed in depth on the Earth's surface, they will be so deployed outward into space. We will be required to operate militarily in space as well as in the atmosphere. Manned and unmanned vehicles and space stations will be in orbit around the Earth for surveillance and communications purposes, and to control and direct offensive operations employing weapon systems both from space and from the surface of the Earth. Perhaps by the year 2000, bases in other parts of the solar system will be in the planning stages. At any rate, soon the term aerospace defense will be as commonplace as that of air defense. It will be infinitely more complex, but mastery of its effective application will be essential for man's safety.
So of all the indivisible considerations as we face the future, none is apt to equal the timeless concern of man that he and his family be secure, safe above all from a surprise attack as he pursues his daily life and all it holds for him. The military power he advocates in his behalf is dedicated to all his interests, ensures his nation's growth, and in deterring an enemy determines how fulsome the future may be. This is Delvina, thanking you for being with me through the 13 programs, of which this is the final one, as we have put our face to the future.
Face to the Future has been a transcribed series on this station produced in cooperation with the North American Air Defense Command.